Welcome back to the video store. As per usual, Nat and I have done the entire show before we started the show, so we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Such a good week.
This has been the downfall of this Just for Fun podcast, is that we now have gotten into this bad habit of starting our live recording behind the scenes like an hour or 30 minutes before we actually go live, which just means that then we just do the entire show. But
well, we catch up and we get too excited, so we talk about it.
It's true. It's true. I'm very ready for today's episode because in contrast to my normal, I didn't watch it and Natalie did all of the work. I actually watched it right before because I was like, oh, I have a couple hours time. And this is one of my favorites. So I'm glad that I rewatched it. I have all of my notes and all of your notes. I'm very, very excited.
I love that. So earlier today, Katie was like, I can't find this anywhere. Do I own the DVD? I sent the kid to go look at the DVD case to see if I have it. And so I sent her a link to watch the movie. And I'm like, oh, wait, make sure you don't watch this in front of the kids unless you feel like explaining what a cock ring is, among other things.
Among other things. I mean, to be clear, I had no intention of watching this in front of my small children. So don't judge me. Don't judge me if you're sitting in the chat.
I'm like, just in case you forgot, because it's been a minute since 1990.
It has been a minute since 1990. And without further ado, if you just decided for the first time to listen to this podcast, Natalie and I are sorry. Tonight we are talking about Pump Up the Volume, starring Christian Slater, and it is a 1990 release. So it's like right there on the cusp of we've been cruising through all the 90s movies. And throwback to last Thursday, TBT, Throwback Thursday, we talked last Thursday about She's All That and about how much we just as Canadians wanted desperately to go to this high school. Well, this movie was written by a Canadian, so this is a much more realistic high school experience for us.
And a Quebecer. Where Katie and I grew up in Montreal, Quebec. And the writer or director was from Shawinigan, which is actually near Vermont.
Yeah, kind of almost on the Vermont border.
Yeah.
So it was nice to not only see a couple of fun Canadianisms in it, among which Leonard Cohen's music plays like a huge role in this movie, which is so exciting and delightful as people who grew up in the Montreal area. Leonard Cohen is just everything.
All love Leonard Cohen, like adore.
All of Leonard Cohen. And we have if you're listening, we record live on YouTube every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, and we have Tom hang out in the chat with us today. So hey Tom, if you want to hang out in the chat with us, you are always welcome. Every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. But if you're not here, that's okay. We can be tucked into your ears and hanging out with you whenever you get around to watching or listening. But yeah, let's dive in because this movie is the reason why we rate all of our movies with Christian Taters. So I'm really excited about this one.
So Katie asked me before we started recording what are my top 3 favorite moments of the movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you a small story. So our friend Allison, she's like, I don't understand your thing with Christian Slater. He's an older gentleman. He's not bad looking, slightly balding. She's like, I don't get it though. No. And I was like, you don't get it though? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, you're coming over. We're watching Pump Up the Volume. And as we're watching it, she's like, oh my God, the way he cocks his eyebrow though. She gasps. And then she's like, oh my God, his hair though. And oh my God, the tone of his voice though. And I'm like, yes, this is Christian Slater.
This is Christian Slater though.
Within the first maybe 30 seconds of the movie, she's like, I get it. I am in love with Christian Slater, and I don't know why I didn't know this before.
Yeah, Christian Slater in this movie. I know all of you listening or watching are thinking to yourself, but Heathers though. But
Yes,
I would argue as someone who loves Heathers, and we will definitely do Heathers, Christian Slater in this movie is just so wonderful because he has these two different sides to himself as this character. He's both like crazy and off the wall and totally himself and comfortable in his skin and willing to talk hard and scream and be just this like motivated, passionate leader like of a generation. And yet in public, in real life, walking around in school, he is shy and withdrawn and cannot talk to anyone and definitely can't talk to girls. And I feel like it would have been very difficult to play this role and to play it so perfectly. And he nails it. And our first fun fact of the night, this role originally was the writer of the screenplay wanted John Cusack to play this role, which I adore John Cusack, but I don't think he would have done it as well as Christian Slater. And that's coming from like John Cusack is like everything to me. But
let's think of 80s going into 90s John Cusack.
True.
All the talking that he does, and he could have.
Yes, but
seems like John Cusack, but
John Cusack doesn't have the edge and the darkness that goes into. I feel like John Cusack is just a little too sunny. Maybe now John Cusack, like if you follow John Cusack on Twitter, it's heartbreaking because he is not sunny. He's like very deeply political and has like very strong feelings about things, and he is not 80s and 90s John Cusack. But I just think his the way that I picture John Cusack in my mind from this era, he just was like too sweet. And I love that Christian Slater could play incredibly sweet, shy, you just want to hug him Mark, and like cock ring, crazy, like masturbating on air, insane Mark who can just say exactly what he feels. And this movie is just so therapeutic. And as people who are just new into the podcasting space and are doing this for fun, we just kept saying to each other like, wow, this is like, pirate radio is like what all of us who are jumping into podcasting want. Like wish that you could have this following that like don't really know necessarily who you are, but like love you. Right?
So the movie starts off, there's this kid from New York City. His parents move him across country to Arizona for work. His dad has a job. He's the new commissioner of the school board for high schools, and his parents are worried. He's depressed. He hides in the basement all the time, and in the basement, hiding from everybody, he locks himself away, and as a way to entertain himself, he has a pirate radio show. So his parents had got him a shortwave radio so he could communicate with his friends back east, but he couldn't find anybody, so he just started talking into the ether. He's like, 92 FM, and seems like a good station. The price is right. It's free. It's pirated. And he was just talking to nobody. But then, as the movie progresses, you see that the local teenagers, the high school, like they all listen to this show. They're even like, and this is going to sound crazy to people who didn't live through this, but they're recording the radio show onto a cassette tape.
Yeah, exactly. I love, not only are they doing that, but like later in the movie, as the story progresses, they're like selling
that one kid hustling at school, he's selling these like pirate radio show tapes.
Pirate radio show tapes, yeah. Exactly.
I'm like, $5 in 1990, that's pretty steep, but
profitable.
These kids really wanted this show.
Yeah.
So this guy Mark is extremely introverted, which I feel that because that's me in real life.
Yeah.
And then he has this radio show where he goes on air and he gets to be whoever he wants to be. So he creates this persona called Happy Harry Hardcore.
Yeah.
And he talks shit. He listens to good music. And, well, I guess at the times, especially in 1990, it's a lot of, I guess, underground music that was becoming mainstream,
Yeah.
like Ice-T, Beastie Boys, Pixies, Cowboy Junkies. It's kind of just as they're becoming mainstream kind of artists.
Yeah. This
And
is
he just talks shit and gets letters in a P.O. box, responds to them on the show, and he
he
maintains.
calls them too. He like
Yes.
if they put their phone number in, he actually calls them. And I love, again, I just feel like it's so relevant as you compare that entire experience to like what many podcasters are doing now in this space. I think obviously podcasters lose a lot of their anonymity in today's society with internet and with everything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I just definitely noticed the parallels between the two of them. Even the idea of like going to a PO box to pick up like letters and like swag and things that they were sending him. Many of my favorite podcasters right now have PO boxes and are like, engaging and entertaining with all of their fans who can write in or who can send them stuff. And there's something that's just so kind of nostalgic and special about that, which I just loved rewatching this. I was like, oh, right, this is awesome.
I have to say, at the beginning of the movie, you turn it on and it has that sort of static crackle of turning on an old radio.
Oh, yeah.
Which gave me shivers because I was like, oh my God, I'm so excited for this movie. And it opens with like he's talking on his on-air show, and he says, do you ever get the feeling that everything in America is totally fucked? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, was this movie made today?
All the time.
I'm like, was it made that so long ago that we're back in that space? Mm-hmm. Or did it just never change?
Well, I think there are a couple of things there, right? Like I feel like it always feels that way for teenagers, right? So like what I absolutely love about this movie is that, I guess, in contrast to some of the movies we've been watching and talking about recently, like She's All That, for example, last week, like that was a very sunny, positive, like very fictionalized version of what a teenage high school experience was like. Whereas I feel like this movie, and even Empire Records to some level, there's a lot of similarities between Empire Records and Pump Up the Volume, but these are much more of a realistic take about how hard it is to be a teenager and to kind of have some power but not all power, and to not know, who you are, or who you want to be, or what's expected of you, or what you want to do. Like I don't know. I think what makes this movie super special is that there's just something incredibly powerful about that forbidden, about being able to literally say anything that you want and, and be this rallying cry. Like, again, it's just this radio as therapy kind of vibe that I just love.
Yeah, he quickly finds out, as he's new in this town and new at this high school, that there is very much so not a forum and not a safe or healthy place for teenagers to ask questions, to express concerns, to even speak their own truth. So right at the beginning of the movie, we're introduced to the gym teacher yanking kids off of the school bus, like before their foot even hit the ground in the schoolyard, and they're being dragged to the principal's office and being expelled. Yeah. And you slowly start to see throughout the movie they're being expelled for dressing a little punk, for being pregnant, for
not having the highest scores, right, on the SAT, all of the
SAT, which I'm like, is that's a thing?
I mean, it's an illegal thing, to be clear. It's an illegal thing, to be clear. Yeah, and that bumps up that experience that he's having and he's seeing, being new into this school and seeing how broken and damaged this school is in direct contrast to everything that his parents are telling him, right? So every night over dinner throughout this entire movie, his parents are constantly like, you're at the best school. This school is the best school. This school, has the highest, grades and credentials, and everyone raves about this school. Like, we did everything to put you into this amazing school. And it's all a lie, but all of the adults are in on it, and all of the teenagers are suffering as a result of it. So it sets up everything perfectly.
I have to say, his parents are pretty awesome, because they're like, sweetie, are you depressed? Because we totally get it. We moved you away from all your friends, from the city. We're out in the suburbs now. It really sucks. It's super boring here. But it's like, what can we do? And they ask, like, what about therapy? have you made any friends? Can you join some clubs? Like, they are actually
They're trying.
awesome parents.
Yeah.
But it made me think about it, because I remember watching this movie when I was younger, thinking, I'm like, why would you have that kind of line of communication with your parents? You wouldn't.
Yeah.
You don't feel comfortable. You're trying to learn and trying to grow, and you're experiencing new things and becoming an adult. It's not something that you share with your parents. It's something that you want. When you're a teenager, you want this independence. You want to become your own person. So as much as they're trying, I'm like, yeah, even though today, watching it as an adult, I'm like, these parents are amazing. I'm like, I still wouldn't talk to them about it.
And he doesn't, right? Like, he's kind of eye roll, but you're right. Like, they have given him, like, as a parent watching this movie, it's like they've moved him into this like nice neighborhood. It's like, it's a nice house. He has like all of this equipment, like his downstairs, like, oh, I'm so angry, I must slam the door, and downstairs space is like a nicer recording studio than I have here in my house for work and fun, right? Like, he's got like his, his radio, his records, he's got like a sofa, he's got like, the whole vibe and feel, and it's clearly his space. Like, at no point do they ever go down. Like, at one point in the movie, when they like think that he's up to something, they go down, but really, like, they give him a ton of privacy and control over that space.
The basement has a lock.
Yeah.
And the scene at the end when his parents are trying to get down because they suspect he's this pirate radio guy, and they're banging on the door, and it's locked, and he's like, hang on, and he's like, they can hear him shuffling stuff around and talking, and he's talking to himself, and he's talking on the radio, but his the female love interest, Nora, actually saves his butt. She ends up showing up and being like, hi, I'm so sorry, I didn't want you to be concerned I was taking him away from his homework. And his parents
are like, whoa, okay. Yeah.
Exactly. His parents, it's such a double standard, because they're like, oh my god, my son has a girl over, way to go, like, oh, you're being such a dog, this is great. And I'm like, no parent would be okay with a girl locked in a basement with a guy showing up like half dressed.
Yeah, it's not a great vibe, but yeah, they do definitely sort of back out of that entire scene for sure.
Yeah. So the show his radio show is becoming more and more popular. He's trying very hard to stay anonymous. This girl, Nora, and her best friend are trying very hard to figure out who he is, because from listening to the show, sometimes he lets slip details of his personal life. So she actually has like a chart, like a murder board of like, okay, eats lunch in the stairwell while reading a book, loves books, goes to the library. Like, she's tracking everything down. And she's one of the people that writes in, and you could see from the letter, she always writes on this red paper and this beautiful black ink, and she's called the Eat Me, Beat Me Lady. And she writes these poems to him, and you could see that Happy Harry, is falling for her.
Yeah.
Whereas Mark is just hiding from her. And there is this point where she is like, hey, I found you eating in the stairwell, and you could see that he knows that she knows, and she's like, I think I know. And he just turns around and runs.
Yeah.
Because Mark is an introvert.
Yep.
He also starts to see the importance that this show is holding for his fellow students, where it is giving them a forum to come forward, to ask questions, to voice their truths.
Yeah.
And it then takes a tragic turn where somebody writes in and says, I'm contemplating committing suicide. Should I do it, Mr. Serious?
Yeah. This was just heartbreaking. Yeah. I've seen this movie a number of times, but it's been a while. And the second that I saw that character pop up, I was like, oh, right. I remember what happens here. Apparently in the original script of this movie, the whole premise of this story was that Mark, the main character, Christian Slater's character, was suicidal and was going on this radio show to say that he was going to kill himself. And I guess they spun it in this different way and kind of lightened it a little bit. But yeah, I think that the completed suicide by this student, who Mark doesn't know at all. No. He doesn't know anyone at this school. He's new, and he's incredibly introverted and shy, so he hasn't really made any friends. But he has this moment where he talks to this kid, because the kid has left a phone number within the letter. So he calls him and he talks to him live on the air. And he's actually not overly insensitive. He's sort of like kind of trying to be funny, but also trying to, get some additional information out, from this kid while he's talking to him on air, who, of course, it goes badly. And unfortunately, this teen does end up committing suicide, but I think it hits him in the same way that it hits the viewer really hard. It hits Mark really hard. And it goes from this moment of being this fun therapeutic release to like, oh, like what I say and what I do is actually affecting the people who are listening on the other end. I'm not just screaming into the void. I am, I am a voice that other people are listening to. And it's painful to watch that realization, because how important that,
and he's so affected by it.
Yeah, he's so affected by it, and how important that space is for him to just have that release, because he just doesn't know what else to do. He doesn't have any close friends. He doesn't have, family that he can talk to. He just feels so alone. And so it's a dichotomy, right? Like he feels really alone, but he's got this outlet, but now this outlet is becoming a different thing, and he really
for everybody.
Exactly. But yeah,
he does
well
say from the very beginning, he's like, I don't know why people ask me for advice. I am not a person to give advice. He does maintain that throughout his radio show.
Yeah.
And regardless, it still goes sideways with this Mr. Serious letter.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found a little incredulous, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the school, they know of these tapes. They know of Happy Harry Hardcore. They're being confiscated on campus, which there's this really funny scene where like, the gym teacher confiscates one of these tapes from a student and then goes into the teacher's lounge to play it. And he puts the tape in the tape recorder or the tape deck, and he presses play right at a scene where Harry/Mark is wanking off. I mean, except we know as viewers, he's not actually wanking off. He's just pretending to for comedic effect.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was so funny when they're all like uptight and talking about the students and expelling students for like the smallest thing. And then the teacher, which he could have rewound the tape to any point, starts playing it right where Harry is wanking off.
Yeah.
So at this point, the school is aware, and teachers are becoming aware of this radio show, and they decide to blame this kid's suicide on the radio show. Mm-hmm. They end up holding a parent-teacher conference where the school completely maintains that it's this radio show's fault.
It's corrupting the youth.
And they call the police, which I do love in this. One of the police officers or detectives is like, come on. He's like, don't you remember what it's like to be a teenager? Like, this kid is just on air being a kid. Like, he's not inciting anything. Are you guys crazy? And then we find out the FBI is coming in, and the FCC, which the FCC is federal. So there's like the FCC, like, goon squad comes in to track down this kids pirate radio station.
It feels a little over the top, but hey, it's a 90s movie, so, it's got to be a little intense.
It did make it gave it that suspense, and it gave it this closure, because at some point there had to be, like, all of this had to come to head. But I was watching it, and I remember this even as a kid, I'm like, really? The FBI would give a shit about some suburban kids pirate radio show with, like, a viewership or a listenership of, like, 20?
Yeah, and he's also, I mean, I know, like, it's still technically illegal, so it's not that I'm saying that he's doing the right thing, quote unquote, but he's not, it's one of those, like, really intense gray areas, right? Because there's no one else on air on that, and everyone is opting to tune in.
It's free band.
So he's not really doing anything that's destructive, other than he's not playing by the, like, the rules of the airwaves, right? He's saying things he shouldn't be saying. He's doing things he shouldn't be doing. Yeah, exactly.
He's saying, my parents always worried about me because I'm locked in my room alone, standing here naked, wearing nothing but a cock ring.
Which he then reveals later in the movie that he has no idea what that even is.
I love this. So this girl, Nora, that keeps trying to track him down, finally tracks him down, and she tells him, like, she confesses, she's like, I love your show. Like, she basically takes charge. She's like, you are now my boyfriend. We are in a relationship, and I am your partner for this radio show. Like, she's just like, I am the eat me, beat me lady. I am a real person. This is who I am, though I'm not really that person, but I can, except for when I am. She's just takes charge.
She owns herself, like, in a much more pure way than he does. And again, like, I mean, these are all common themes, right? That exist in all these movies, but she really, you know, she really teaches him how to be himself. Like, I think one of my absolute favorite moments in this movie is where I wrote this down. He slowly realizes how powerful he really is. And she says to him something to the extent of, I was like typing too quickly, I was watching, but she says to him something like about, you know, the fact that he had said that he was looking for a voice, right? He's like looking for a voice of the generation to help them, right? Like someone that can rise up. And she was like, you're the voice.
You are the voice.
You are the voice.
You are the voice you were looking for.
Yeah, you are the voice you were looking for.
Too.
Yeah, right? But I think that's such an iconic moment because we've all, I would assume, I mean, certainly I've been there, but I think we've all been there at that moment where you're like, you know, you're looking for someone else that's going to save you. And in almost every instance, you need to save yourself. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
So in this, he's such an introvert that he ends up turning on his radio show to tell her how he feels.
To talk to her. Yeah. She's literally in the room.
He says, I got this letter, aka myself, saying that I can't talk. I can't talk to people in public. I can't talk to people. I can't tell them my feelings. What should I do? And he basically explains to her that, yes, he really likes her, and yes, she intrigues him, and he wants to get to know her. And he explains all of his feelings and his reason for being an introvert and his reason for his show. He explains everything to her on air. And it's a great scene because then he gains his confidence the more he's talking. Christian Slater takes his shirt off, which I'm like, no kid in high school has abs like that. Also, important to note, I know there's this thing on social media where there's the gray sweatpants season that all the kids are liking. Well, let's just say Christian Slater wears gray sweatpants every time he goes onto this radio show. He started that trend. Just putting it out there.
He's also a really big fan of a diet wild cherry Pepsi, which I like. Once I was watching this, I was like, oh man, I wish I had some diet wild cherry. I don't even like diet drinks, but I was definitely jonesing some sort of cherry Coke or Pepsi.
Cherry cola of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he gains all his confidence when he's confessing who he is to her via the on-air show. And there's this great scene where he takes his shirt off and proudly says, you know, my parents are concerned for me being alone in my room with a cock ring. And anyways, he puts on a song that he dedicates to her, which Katie and I were obsessing over earlier. The song was called where'd it go? Why Can't I Fall in Love by Ivan Neville. It's so on the soundtrack. It's phenomenal. And he goes out and they have this moment where they're both like full of their confidence. And they're dancing and she takes her shirt off and they're listening to the song and then they trip and fall and she's kind of on top of him and she makes some like snide flirtatious comment about his cock ring and he confesses, he's like, I don't actually know what a cock ring is.
Yeah, he's like, no idea.
Because he's a teenager. He's in high school. He's like, and it's this moment and I love that moment because that moment gives you all the flutters leading up to it and you feel like, oh, it's so romantic. And then it's like, we're honestly just kids and we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
So they both are like, let's pause this moment because neither of us are ready for where this is heading. And I was like, I like that.
Yeah, this movie is very, very gritty, but very real. Like I
very truthful for teenagers being teenagers.
Yeah. I wrote down, whenever I watch this movie, I'm always somewhere between laughing and crying. Unlike the ones we've covered so far, this movie is actually representative of what the teenage experience is like. Raw, painful, gritty. It's like, it it's not painting a pretty picture. And he is through his show, he is talking directly about all of the things that everyone when they're a teenager, and often when we're adults as well, are just too afraid to say, too afraid to talk about out loud. They're the things you're told not to talk about. Like they are, just the forbidden topics. And I think it's what makes this likable.
At some point in my notes that this movie really shows that teenagers are struggling to figure out who they are and how to speak their truth.
Yeah.
And how to do it in a safe space. And I'm like, it also points out that the parents don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the parents have no idea how to communicate properly. And I'm like, that's the biggest con in life, is that you think when you're a teenager, when you grow up, you're going to figure your shit out. Well, you don't. You never do.
You never do.
That's just the truth.
We're watching this now as old people. We're like, oh, we really, resonate with the parents. I really, really resonate with these parents. You are right though. Like his parents are this entire movie. Like they have a couple of moments where you're sort of eye rolly and it's not like super appropriate what they're doing, but it's also a movie that was filmed in 1990, right? But they do come through in the end. Like so his dad is the superintendent or whatever his official title is of the school system, or the commissioner. Of the school. And and this whole thing comes to this head, right? So you have, as Nat was saying, like the FCC, the FBI, all these insane, actually never really going to happen in real life situations where he's being like hunted and he keeps trying to give up. Mark is like, I'm good. Like Mark, instead of Harry, is just like, nah, thanks. No, don't want to be involved in any of this. And Nora just keeps pushing him and supporting him. And she's, like, you need to stand up. Like this, this is happening. At the same time, the whole school is just like Team Harry. Like they are quoting his quotes. They are like pushing back. They're standing up for each other. Like whether or not he wants to admit it, he has started a movement. He is involved in this protest that he, didn't even realize that he had started. But it is amazing to me that it comes down to these final moments where, he is all in and he's taking the radio show like literally on the road so he cannot be trapped by the FCC. And his dad is the one that like wins with him and for him in the end. Like his dad is the one that like discovers that the school has just been awful and actually isn't the amazing school that he'd been saying.
The principal literally is kicking people out to keep the SAT scores up.
Yeah.
That stupid gym teacher / her goon lackey literally physically assaulted a student on campus.
Yeah.
They fired the English teacher for saying, hey, why did you expel 30 or 20 kids in the first 30 days of school this semester? Yeah. I'm like, that can't be possible.
You're like, what? Say what now? This is not the perfect high school we wanted to go to in the States.
No.
This is not it.
The dad being the school commissioner is like, you're all fired.
Yeah.
Except for the English teacher. We love her.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, though, because I feel like a lot of these movies, especially these kind of like teen dramas, teen romances that came out in this era, the parents weren't quite this cool. Like they're
No.
And this movie, the entire movie is all this kind of battle between the adults and the system and the teens, right? Whereas this is a nice turning point where, his parents do really care. It takes them a while to get there, but at no point does the dad say,
figure out what's happening.
Yeah, but the dad at no point is like, oh, it must just be the kids acting out. Like at no point does the dad say that, which most other 90s movies would have been like,
they're shipping you off to military school and all the other 90s movies.
Exactly. 100%.
So at the beginning of this movie, I love that they kind of set up this whole Breakfast Club
I wrote that one down too.
High school, right?
Yeah.
They had, the popular kids, and there's this girl, was it Peggy? I can't remember
Paige.
Her name.
I love Paige.
Paige, that's it, Paige. She's like the super skinny, beautiful blonde, wears pearls to school kind of thing, straight A student. Yeah. There's, the punks, the alternative, the jocks, the artists, they set up all the different, like sort of Breakfast Club characters, but
it's radio not as cliquish though. Like, did you feel that? I feel like this one
at the very beginning. I'm talking like intro, because the movie, his show is very quickly starts dissolving that
Yeah,
barrier
that's true.
and is bringing them all together to the point at the end of the movie they're literally all together, like in the field of like the school, the on the football field or whatever,
Yeah.
listening to the radio show together as a community. I thought that was really neat that at the beginning it's like they're all separated in their cliques, and then at the end they're all together because teenagers are literally fighting the same thing,
Yeah.
the same struggles.
Yeah.
Paige is awesome because
Yeah.
she you could see, so she has like that bad parent that's like, oh, you better get your beauty sleep, says her father, because you have your Yale pre
Yeah. She's got all the
interview
pressure. Yeah.
tomorrow. It's like, oh, don't listen to that radio show because you need to get straight A's, and like there's so much pressure.
Yeah.
And what was it that Harry said slash Mark?
I don't know if I wrote that one
Like,
down.
so they like everybody just like, let's just go wild.
Oh,
Or
yeah.
something
Yeah.
to that
Just,
effect.
yeah.
So then everybody, you see all the kids, like wherever they're listening to the show, whether it's at home or in the field or in the car or wherever, just start all going crazy and screaming, and they're all screaming, talk hard, because it's happy, Harry hardcore. So it's brought up throughout like one of the taglines is talk hard.
Yep.
And
That's what Tom says. Tom says, time to talk hard.
yes, yes, it is time to talk hard. So she takes her pearls and she sticks them in the microwave, which then explodes, catches her kitchen on fire, and the explosion is in her face. So you see her when she goes to the parent-teacher meeting about this, the emergency town meeting, and you can see her face is all bruised up, and she has bandages because she broke her nose because of blowing up the kitchen. And I thought this was also interesting that at the beginning of this meeting, all the parents are fighting like, we need to call in the FBI and stop this show. And the principal's like, absolutely, it's this one pirate radio kid's fault. And then she comes in and she says, no, you've got it all wrong. There's something really fucked up about the school.
Yeah.
It's like, we're expelling students because we're bringing the grade point average down. They're, they don't want anybody that looks weird. They don't want anybody that talks weird or dresses weird or isn't smart enough. And in it, parents actually listen to her.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, we want to hear what she's saying. And the principal's literally like kicking this kid off stage.
Yeah, I like how realistic this is, because I feel like a lot of these movies, a lot of these characters become sort of cliches of themselves, right? So you have like, the cheerleader and the captain of the football team and the goth kid and whatever. And there's a nod to those in this movie, but she's not at any point as like the popular, one that no one can talk to, like hot girl. She's as smart as she is pretty. She's never mean to anyone throughout, like even in the very beginning, she's like really kind all the way through, and you just sort of feel for her from the very start, even when she's a bit more separated from the other group because of the pressures that are on her. But there's even a moment where Mark tries to be a bit more vocal, so he walks up and says hi to her, and she's like, hi, and he just runs off. But she's not she's sort of taken aback by just someone she doesn't know is talking to her, but she's not ever mean. So there's not really that kind of typical high school cliques where there's the popular girls who are really catty, and then you have the all of these little groups. I feel like there isn't quite that level. Right? Yeah, exactly. It's not quite the point.
The point was they wanted to dissolve that quickly to show that teenagers are just teenagers.
Yeah, exactly.
It is the human experience, and we are human. We all live it. So,
exactly.
I did write in my notes, I'm like, of course he has a crush on the pretty blonde girl. I'm like, at least her one redeeming quality is that she's as smart as she is pretty.
I know. I wrote that. I just really love that the popular girl is also incredibly smart. I was like, yes,
I like
she's
that.
a smart girl and a popular girl.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's one scene after the parent-teacher conference. It shows the English teacher or writing teacher at home, and she's she's young. I mean, realistically, she's what, in her 20s?
She's probably way younger than we are now. Yes.
Yeah. And she's at home and she's listening to the radio show, and you can tell she's enjoying it. She has a full open bottle of wine and one wine glass, and she's just tucked in, and she's like, yeah, I love this radio show.
This is me every night with my true crime podcast. I'm just like, yep, I'm in.
Yeah, it's great to see that adults in the movie were like in real life. Like you do occasionally have parents or adults that will listen to you. It's not like this whole us versus them that we do often get in movies.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying to think of a better word, but it's smoother. Like this one doesn't have kind of the like really black and white of like, you know, these cliches and this thing. This is a little bit in the gray area from all the way through the movie. Like there's topics
it's more organic, I think.
Yeah, there's topics that are never normally discussed. There are, you know, there are personalities that are more kind of eye-raising than what you would normally see especially at this time in movies, but they just embrace it and go all the way into it, which I think is great. Really like Empire Records in that way. Like there's a lot of characters that just, you know, are true to themselves and are not afraid to scream or yell or blow things up in their microwave.
In it, one of Harry/Mark's callers calls or writes a letter. So Harry calls him, he leaves the number, and he's like, I have your letter, I haven't read it out loud. Like, do you want to tell us about it if you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
And this young man discusses how over the summer he bumps into one of the athletes, you know, this guy, and asks him if he wants to go out, and they go hiking or something, and he ends up confessing to the guy, like, oh, I really like you, and the guy's like, yeah, I know, and they spend really good quality time together, and then the guy's like, oh, let's tan and take off all of our clothes, so he does, and the other guy hesitates, and the football team or whatever ends up stealing his clothes and leaving him stranded. And he's like, I feel terrible about myself for having let this happen to me, and I feel terrible about myself because I still think about this guy. And Harry points out right away, he's like, it sounds like you're the one that's not fucked up. He's like, you're the one that knows exactly what's going on. You know exactly who you are.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything wrong. And like, and I love that. I love that. Even though he continually says, I can't give advice because I don't know anything, he gives amazing advice.
Yeah, exactly. It's very Dear Abby, like teenage Dear Abby.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire
There's
thing.
quite a few movies I could name, was it Charlie Bartlett was also like this.
Yeah, where he's like the psychologist at the school, yeah.
At the school, and there's the TV show Sex Education where it's the same thing, where it's like, so it is this common trope where there tends to be like that one kid that everybody goes to for advice, and this is kind of very origin for that, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking through my notes. I love that Radio Shack makes an appearance in this, because it just like took me back. It was like, I built all this at Radio Shack. You're like, of course you did.
Small note. So the reason he calls himself Happy Harry Hardcore,
hard on,
sorry. Happy Harry. I said it hardcore the whole time. It is Happy Harry Hard On. Thank you.
That's all right.
The reason he is HHH is because the school is Hubert Humphrey High.
Sure is.
Yeah.
Yep,
so
sure
he's
is.
funny, and it's interesting because you notice like the detectives notice his humor throughout this, like as they're trying to track him down because he's such a deviant. Like every time they like reach a wall with trying to figure out who he is, there's some sort of joke about it and some sort of wit, and they actually kind of like laugh to themselves about it every time.
Jeepers, something just fell.
So for the listeners, Katie just got jump scared by
we're not even talking about horror movies and something was jump scaring me. Jeepers.
Yeah, so I do like that. He does also kind of give this very it's a very 90s thing, this like sort of punk anarchist vibe.
Yeah.
Which was very popular then in the early 90s.
Yep.
We kind of had, so whereas punk kind of hit the scene in the 80s in the UK, it sort of hit America, like the whole SLC punk, the Seattle punk scene hit in the 90s.
Yep.
So it kind of hits on, the movie kind of touches those tones that is coming into America at that time, which is really neat. The soundtrack, just to, like,
Another
you guys
amazing
need to check it
soundtrack.
out.
Yeah.
So Leonard Cohen he uses Leonard Cohen songs for his intro and outro on his radio show. So there's a lot of Leonard Cohen, and as Montrealers, Kitty and I just sort of super fangirl over that. We love him.
We're just like, hang on, turning this up.
Yeah. There's the Pixies. There's Ice-T. Like, if you watch Law and Order, you know, the guy that has been on the show since day one and is always kind of still surprised by everything that's happening on the Special Victims Unit.
Yeah.
He actually was a famous rapper at the time, and I'm not recommending you go look up the song because you will.
All of these songs, the entire soundtrack is like a complete representation of the movie in that it is offensive. It's meant to be offensive. It's meant to be like a protest anthem.
Yes.
So
the Ice-T song's not so much a protest anthem.
No, I mean the entire soundtrack is meant to be a protest anthem. These songs are
just
also
about
dated 90s, dated. There's a lot of stuff.
I mean,
there.
He's a great rapper. He's phenomenal, but the song does not hit the same. Also Beastie Boys, and in it there's a scene where they're kind of dancing in the quad or whatever, listening to a mixtape, and the Beastie Boys are playing, and one of the teachers is like, "The fuck you're listening to this?" And I remember that in high school, where it's like you could not get caught listening to Beastie Boys. That was bad. You got in so much trouble.
I was having a moment where I was like, I don't remember ever being allowed to like listen to me. Like, maybe it's because I didn't go to a school where there was like, it was ever warm outside during the school year.
Yeah, no.
But I was like, wow, dancing in like the quad. I don't even think we had a quad. We had like an outsider. I had a few Canadian moments there, which is ironic because this school was apparently based on a school in Montreal, and I was like, which school? But I couldn't find any information to see what school it was. But
it's
apparently,
got to be my high school.
Maybe it was your high school. Who knows? He's from Shawinigan,
because it was a big
though,
public school.
Yeah.
No uniforms. Like a big yard where kind of like kids went out on like lunch or recess into this yard where there was like nobody supervising you because the school was huge. So shout out PCHS, Pierrefonds Comprehensive High School. And maybe you are the high school. Bump up the volume.
Actually, I was only able to find a few facts, and so we already covered one in that John Cusack was technically the first choice, but we're happy that he didn't, even though we love him.
Christian Slater, thank you.
Christian Slater, thank you, right? All right, so a couple other facts. So at the English language high school so maybe it was PCHS, the English language high school that the screenwriter attended, he had a classmate with an amateur printing press that he kept in his basement, and the classmate would actually use it to make anonymous pamphlets that he distributed around school. So this is the kind of vibe that this storyline comes out of. And then the third fact isn't even really a fact. I just love, there's a quote from Christian Slater about this movie, and he says, and I quote, "Pump Up the Volume is my favorite movie that I've ever done. It wasn't a typical high school movie, and it really did get into some of the darker, more gruesome details of what it's actually like to be a teenager in high school." And I was just like, beautifully put, Christian Slater. I could not agree more. And I think, honestly, that's the reason I like this movie, is it just feels like everything that we all went through and felt. And I didn't even have like nearly as extreme an experience as a teenager as a lot of these teenagers did, but it's still so relevant even today, watching like a lot of these topics that are just always sort of things you quote unquote shouldn't talk about. And it was just nice to see them played out so perfectly on camera.
There was a surprise cameo in this. It wasn't a cameo at the time because the person was such a little bebe.
No such thing as a cameo. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Seth Green is in this movie.
Seth Green is in this
movie.
movie.
He's in 2 shots. He is. So at one point they hack into the school's PA system, like public announcement system, sound system. I'm explaining the old technology to play.
It's like a podcast, but for a school.
Yes. So he hacks into it to play Harry's radio show on the loudspeakers in the school. Yeah. And then there's a scene at the end where he's like lounging across the hood of a car in like a denim tuxedo, by the way.
Yeah.
Like
as you do.
A Canadian tuxedo is what we call it. It's denim on denim on denim. It's not actually a tuxedo.
Yeah.
But you could Google Canadian tuxedo. That's really what he was wearing.
Today's
amazing.
Canadianism is brought to you by Natalie and Seth Green.
Seth Green had the he had long red hair, like all the freckles. Oh my God, he was such a gawky little kid. I love him. I love him.
Great. Oh, and I found a couple of memes. So this isn't going to be at all helpful for people who are listening, but hey, we'll read through them anyway. This means you just need to be watching us over on YouTube, either live or in the replay. But I think you quoted this one, but he says, "There's nothing to do anymore. Everything decent's been done. All great themes have been used up, turned into theme parks." I was like, oh man.
I actually wrote that in my notes. I didn't say it yet.
Just
but
brilliant.
Yeah, I love that.
And hang on. I got a couple more.
What he's doing with that?
I know. He's like, oh man, man. All right. Then he said, "We're all worried. We're all in pain. That just comes with having eyes and having ears." There's so many great quotes in this. It was hard. And I love, for those who are not watching, Christian Slater smokes a cigarette for basically this entire movie. And supposedly he smoked so many cigarettes that he was sick, like physically sick, for a lot of the filming of this movie. I'm sure he was just like not okay, just not okay with it. But in all of these memes and GIFs, he is like hardcore smoking
He's
cigarettes.
Chain smoking while doing the radio show. It wasn't really, we kind of knew. This is the beginning of us knowing that smoking was bad.
Yeah, I have to admit, I like knowing it's bad, and I still know it's bad, but it did look pretty cool in this movie. Sorry.
He's wearing gray sweatpants, some vintage 50s bowling shirt, chain smoking, and talking to his lizard.
Yeah.
He has a pet iguana that he literally takes out of the tank to like hold up and talk to, so he's talking to somebody while doing his show.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah. Well, this is the last quote. I'll read it off, and then we can go to our Christian Tater review system, which obviously is ridiculous for today's episode. But the last quote is, "First of all, you're not screwed up. You're unscrewed. You're an unscrewed up reaction to a screwed up situation." So hey, you know what, listeners? If you're feeling really screwed up this week, it's been a week for me where I've had moments of feeling really screwed up. So this was just a nice, incredibly depressing yet also funny movie to reset all of that. We're not screwed up. we're just dealing with the screwed up situation here and there. So
another quote I really liked from this, when he's talking about the school, the administration in the school, he's like, "We've been butt surfed by the system this whole time." Which
that's a good one.
God.
Solid decision.
So good.
Well, are you ready? Are you ready for our potato review? I actually called this scene potato review. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. I had to include the OG photo, Nat, of you holding Christian Tater. We may need to get like an updated Christian Tater to send.
We should.
To send to you again. For those of you who don't follow along with the fun, you can actually send a potato in the mail to people. We've done this a couple of times, both my full-time job. We have sent some of the experts we've worked with potatoes with their faces on it, because why not? And then because of that, I was like, oh, I could send one to Nat with Christian Slater's face on it. Yes. And thus our review system was born. But yeah, potatoparcel.ca is the Canadian one. And I think it's probably just like shipapotato.com or something like that.
I think it's potatoparcel.com. I actually, just so you know, I never laughed so hard than when I opened this parcel that was kind of rattling around in this cardboard box. And Katie's like, open it. And I open it, and it's an actual potato. Like a real edible potato.
Yeah,
and she stuck a sticker of Christian Slater on it and said, what did you put? Spud Slater loves Nat on the back of it.
Loves Nat, yeah. I thought I was clever with Spud Slater because alliteration, and then you were like Christian Tater, and I was like, done. That's way better. You win with that
I
one.
didn't do it on purpose.
No, it was way better.
And the picture of me with Christian Tater, it took me a minute because I was like, how does one pose with a potato?
Well, you did it really well. And you didn't do because if you had been like looking like you were going to eat the potato, that would have been weird. I feel like it's come together really well.
Well, I just wanted it to be of me and Christian Tater, you know.
It's true. It's true. It is true. Well, 5 technically 6 in this one. 6 out of 5 because we have the extra one in the photo of Nat. I would say the only
side of
5 with a side of 6. That's hard to say. I would say my only downfall, no, not downfall, my only like thing I didn't love about this movie would be the whole like, I think a little over the top in the whole drama, FBI, and even a little bit in like the like intensity of like of the last few scenes where it's just like, get in a Jeep, we're gonna rotate the radio. Like it's just a little intense, but I'm gonna hold to the 5.5 to 6.
I did
rating.
like their whole sort of Bonnie and Clyde moment at the end, where it's like he goes to pick her up and he's like, I borrowed my mom's Jeep, I went to Radio Shack, I set everything up so we could broadcast live.
I need him to work for me. He's like in it. He can set things up so fast.
We're broadcasting live from the Jeep and we're going to drive around so the cops and the FBI and the FCC don't arrest us and throw us in jail.
Yeah.
But they know that they're going to jail. The movie ends with them being arrested.
Yeah.
Flat out end of the movie. But the thing he says at the end is he's being arrested, he's being cuffed, and he sees all these, like, all of his peers behind him and he's like, talk hard. And then just before the credits roll, it goes black and you hear all these kids tuning into the radio and saying like, hey, I'm so-and-so, this is my radio show. Hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm live on the air. And I just get shivers and goosebumps all the time.
He gave his voice to the people.
Everybody. And I love that it's really just what we're doing now. Like Katie asked me earlier, she's like, what do you think about talking about this pirate radio versus podcasts? And I'm like, why do you think I agreed to do this podcast? Because I am living out my Christian Slater fantasies.
Wait, this isn't not pirate radio? Hang on a second.
Not my Christian Slater fantasies, but like I'm living the dream of being on the pirate radio because of this movie.
True story.
Yes.
Yeah, I never thought it would be so fun. It's been a blast. Well, we did it.
In the comments, Tom says Mark is the original Triple H, which for our listeners, if you don't know, Triple H is a wrestler with the WWE or WWF. I don't remember what decade that changed in.
Yeah.
One is the Wildlife Foundation, so it's WWE now.
Yeah.
Anyways, it used to be the WWF back when Triple H was in.
He's
actually from New Hampshire. We sometimes in the summer go to Lake Winnipesaukee, and he puts on a really good fireworks show for July 4th.
He does.
Love that.
Truth. Well, you have done it. You have wasted another perfectly good hour of your night hanging out with Nat and I, or day if you're listening later. But if you want to hang out with us in the live studio audience, you can always join us Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. For the most part, sometimes we've shifted a couple of times, but generally speaking, we're Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Or you can catch the video on replay here on YouTube, or you can listen wherever your favorite podcast goes out. We drop podcast episodes for audio only listeners on Fridays. Actually, sometimes even earlier than that because I'm a little crazy, but
she gets excited.
I get excited. So excited, you guys. Raw and uncut because we're trying to be less pretentious about the entire situation. So I'm overcoming my perfectionism and I'm just putting it on live, raw, uncut so that you can appreciate all of the brilliant moments. Maybe we'll get to a point where we edit.
Again, to Tom and Kimberly for leaving us some comments during the live show. We appreciate it so much.
I know. I love it. And I'm thinking next week, Nat. I'm thinking Sleepless in Seattle. We're rotating back and forth. I think that might be my call. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's going to make me want to go back to the Empire State Building. And the couple times that I've been to the Empire State Building, it doesn't look like the experience in Sleepless in Seattle. And I get really upset. So just a warning.
People.
Just a warning.
I mean, I don't know.
The doors don't look the same because I think they've updated the doors or that wasn't real. Like in the movie, they close and it like makes the picture of the Empire State Building. But the times that I was there, that wasn't a thing. So
the last time I was there was before 2001.
Mm-hmm.
It was in 99. So I think it did look like that.
No, because I went there. Maybe I went to the wrong door or totally like was so swept up in the experience that I missed the whole thing. But I was there in I was there in 2000. And then I was there again in 2009. And then I've been a few
Didn't
times
you go
since
not
then.
too long ago?
Yeah, I've been recently, but
No?
every time I go, I just know it doesn't have the door thing, so I don't know. Anyway, get ready for that next week, everyone. I have some strong feelings about Sleepless in Seattle, so if you have not
And
yet seen it.
Kimberly, I did see that you recommend LA Confidential. That is
Confidential.
a phenomenal movie.
Oh, maybe
we will
we
get
need
to
to
the
do
whodunits.
that one. Maybe we need to do that one next week. Maybe we can.
Okay, it'll be a surprise what's happening
Okay,
next week because
it'll be a
we'll need to
surprise.
discuss.
That's such a good one, Kimberly. I love that idea. I know. I think we need to move into adult movies. So one or two.
And I love a whodunit.
I do love a
Somebody's
whodunit.
murdered, I'm there.
All right, might have to do that one first and then do Sleepless in Seattle. Now that I've teased it, We're ready. Well, thank you so much for everyone that's hung out. And thanks, Nat, as always. We'll see you again next week.
Yes, ma'am.